Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to those of you who have made it here this evening. I'm very proud to be the chair of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and we've often used the slogan now more than ever to describe the importance of our activities, and it really is now more than ever, because as war rages in Ukraine, the risk of nuclear war is posed more sharply now than it has been for the past 6 decades. The trading of nuclear threats has shattered the nuclear taboo. Leaders of nuclear-armed states have repeatedly proclaimed that, and I quote, "A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought." Yet their combined actions cast doubt on how seriously they take their own words. The situation is perilous. We desperately need serious efforts to find a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. We desperately need serious efforts to radically reduce nuclear tensions. The British government is, at best, completely disinterested in such efforts. At worst, it is incapable of them. In the 13th century, Frederick II had a major quarrel with the then Pope, and he was excommunicated. While excommunicated, he went on a crusade. But instead of fighting the Saracens, he negotiated with them. He secured far more than more warlike crusaders had ever been able to obtain. Now, there's nothing to admire in Frederick's actions and his conquest of land and people. But the point is this: the Pope was absolutely furious. Why was he furious? Because he thought it wicked, he thought it evil, he thought it unconscionable to negotiate with anyone, let alone the Saracens. He wanted them defeated, he wanted them killed, he wanted them subjugated. That was where he was coming from. And like this Pope, the British government and allies would rather continue on a road to disaster than engage in diplomacy, negotiations, and efforts to remove the real risk of nuclear war. What's the British government doing instead? We all know what happened yesterday lunchtime. We know that Liz Truss managed to secure herself a footnote as the shortest-lived Prime Minister in British history, and good riddance, quite frankly. Rishi Sunak's speech on the steps of Downing Street and the announcements of his new cabinet have now enjoyed hours of airtime. But another event took place yesterday, for the second time since September, that should chill us all to the bones. Here's what happened. One of the first acts of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was to write 4 identical letters. He'll have written these letters in his own hand, and he will have done so after being indoctrinated by the Chief of the Defence Staff, who is tasked with explaining the damage that will be done by the detonation of British nuclear warheads. These letters will have been transported from number 10 Downing Street in the heart of London to the 4 nuclear-armed submarines in the Royal Navy. These letters will be locked in a safe to be opened in one circumstance only: loss of all contact and communication following what we presume will be a devastating attack on the United Kingdom. These letters of last resort leave instructions to the captain and commander of each submarine on how to respond in such a situation. And by the time these letters are opened, it must be assumed that the person who wrote them will be dead. The captain and commander will have to decide whether or not to follow the instructions of a corpse. Of all the dimensions of grim stupidity that combine into Britain's nuclear doctrine, these letters of last resort must rank up there with the grimmest and most stupid of all. The Prime Minister and the people of this country are faced with spiralling costs of living, a crisis in the health service, the consequences of the pandemic, looming recession, hungry children, poverty, and much else. But the priority on day one was not feeding the hungry, was not housing the homeless, or caring for the vulnerable. It was to decide how to contribute to the total annihilation and extinction of life on this planet by way of letters that will only be read when the poor, the homeless, the vulnerable, along with the rest of us, Prime Minister or not, are already heaps of ashes. These people are not serious about averting nuclear war or ending the war in Ukraine, and they're not serious about tackling or solving the social, economic and ecological crises that confront us all. Worse, they look intent on compounding each of these crises. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute estimates that in 2021, the Russian military spending stood at $66 billion. In the same year, the United States spent approximately $801 billion. Over the same period, NATO member states, excluding the US, spent $363 billion. As Simon Cooper pointed out in the Financial Times in July of this year, if the US abandons Europe after 2024, other NATO states would outspend Russia more than sixfold. That is, if Trump or one of his protégés wins the presidential election in 2024, not a remote prospect and one we should all prepare for, then the overkill, because that's what it is, the overkill capacity of European, including British, armed forces would remain considerable. And these figures give some context to the Truss government's commitment to spend 3% of GDP on the military. Prime Minister Sunak has yet to announce whether or not he'll follow through on this commitment. But if he doesn't, then Britain will be out of step with its allies in the nuclear-armed alliance NATO, who are remilitarising at speed, billions upon billions. If he doesn't commit to this spending figure, then he may have problems with his Defence Secretary Ben Wallace and Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, both remnants from the Truss regime. The new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and the new Prime Minister himself have warned of difficult decisions in terms of the economy and spending plans. They look likely to impose yet another round of austerity upon us all. The government will attempt to sell us the idea that such spending is there to ensure our security, to keep us all safe, to defend us. This is the military spending, which they will probably commit to whilst they slash everything else. They will tell us it's to keep us secure and to defend us. But the words defence and security should be used with great caution for any number of reasons. But the clearest example is given by the role played in nuclear weapons in Britain's military posture. The Johnson government's 2022 integrated review, Global Britain in a Competitive Age it's called, makes the following claim for Britain's nuclear weapons. They deter the most extreme threats to our national security and way of life, helping to guarantee our security and that of our allies. So according to the British government and its NATO allies, defence and security are ultimately guaranteed by machines designed to unleash megadeath, millions of deaths. Not only is this a foul and repugnant idea in and of itself, but it's outlandish in the extreme. Yet publicly stating your willingness to press the button and kill millions is a shibboleth uttered by all those seeking high office, with one notable exception. But people cannot eat missiles. Warships cannot cure disease. Tanks cannot and will not house the homeless. Fighter aircraft will not care for the needy. Chemical and biological weapons will not educate our children. Nuclear weapons cannot ensure security. And this is why the campaign for nuclear disarmament, as part of our Wages Not Weapons campaign, will be at the People's Assembly demonstration on the 5th of November, to stand in solidarity with the workers and trade unions striking for better wages and a better future for all. Instead of spending unnecessary money on more nuclear warheads, C&D calls on the government to guarantee fair wages and real pay rises for all. Join us there.